Hello, everybody. What is happening tonight? It's Wednesday night. It's Broadcast Team Alpha. It's the Wednesday casual show, and there's nothing too serious going on, but we might get just a tad, just a pinch serious in the beginning, but then we're going to talk about some really, really amazing things. We have a remarkable guest tonight. He's an applied physicist, and some of his work goes into the science of the soul and the afterlife, and he knows about this crazy shift that we're going through and can talk about it energetically. And I was so taken on his website, synchronizeduniverse.com, with some of the accounts of near-death experiences, and I was rapt with the information about the soul. And, I've been with a lot of people when they died. Some of them I was supporting in their transition. Some of them I was fighting to keep them alive. And some of them just up and died and surprised me, like without any warning. But here's what they had in common. It was lights on, and then it was lights off. And when there was lights off and they left, they felt like they were gone. And they left a void despite the physical body still being there. And I've seen emanating essences move from the body, as a hospice nurse. And I love this because it dovetails into Dr. Swanson's book that talks about the nature of the soul and the afterlife. And he even knows about if the soul has weight. So we're going to talk about that. But since we're talking a little bit about death right now, I just want to take a moment and acknowledge and recognize the big shift that is going on and the seeming exodus from the planet that seems to be happening. So for all of our friends who have lost their mothers and their fathers or their loved ones, their cats and their dogs, so much love to you, love and light. And for the people in our community who went non-physical, Ardith Michael, Judith Tremaine, Linda Eubanks, Cher Lynn, and the beautiful Joanna McCoy, who was in hospice last night. We just want to send a lot of love and light out to you. And, even though you may be gone from our sight, you are still with us in our heart. So now let's talk about soul. Let's talk about where they are, because I think Dr. Swanson may know something about this. Aage, what do you think?
Yeah, I sure think so. I also think, though, that Dr. Swanson has been well educated inside the box, but he broke the box and broke out. He was educated at MIT and Princeton at the highest levels of physics. And he did some graduate work with Princeton and Cornell University on the design and the building of a superconducting plasma containment vessel for fusion energy system. I bet we can't say that twice in a row without misspelling it.
Seriously.
He worked in private industry, but also in the dark rooms of government. And he found out that the universities and the colleges, they're not really teaching the whole story. And we're going to hear some of that other story. And that is why now he is actually working within applied physics and also what is called unconventional physics. And I tell you, that's where the fun stuff is. So, and actually here is there's a hint for you. He's written 3 books, and I'm going to name them. The Synchronized Universe, Life Force, the Scientific Basis, Science and the Soul. So, without any more from me, Claude, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Claude.
Hi, folks. Wonderful to talk to you.
Yay, so good to have you back.
Yeah, this is all right. We started out last time you were on here, and we kind of ended up because the time snuck up on us and we had to get off the air, but we didn't quite get done with the soul. When we are living, we are walking around here, think we're living anyway, and we're saying, well, I wonder, I have a soul. No, it's not that way. I think it is the soul that has a physical body. But when the soul drops the body, where does it go, Claude?
Mhm.
Well, I can explain that in my own terms, at least.
Okay.
I, I guess, let me back up a little bit though, because for me, it started out with curiosity, trying to understand how the world works. And I discovered years ago that the Western scientific view, which is kind of a materialistic view, is short-sighted. It leaves out really important things. And what I the way my pathway out of the box was the discovery of remote viewing, and I began hearing rumors from people in very uh, secret programs about remote viewing, and I heard about it in such a way that it had to be true, that what they were doing was something very accurate. It wasn't hit and miss. It wasn't sloppy. This was something. This was a science that they had developed, and that told me that these forces of consciousness are much more real than I ever imagined. If you go to Western science education, you're not taught anything about consciousness. It never enters a physics program, for example, even though 100 years ago, scientists learned that consciousness can affect a quantum experiment. But then they kind of covered it up. They turned their backs on it and said, "Well, we won't look into that. That's a little too messy." And so our Western science today ignores consciousness. Well, it so happens that consciousness is the key to the soul. There are these energies that go beyond the standard Western science, like the aura, for example, which is an energy that I discovered on my own from research, that is key to understanding what consciousness really is. That we are beings that, as you say, we have a body, but are the essence of our personality, the essence of our consciousness is who we really are. Um, so the last 10 years, I've been working on one book called Science of the Soul, the Afterlife, and the Shift, and collecting all the information we have for the evidence for the afterlife, that it is real. There are certain forces, certain experiments we can do that show that it's real. And I think the shift is also real, and we can understand it better when we learn about some of these forces that have been left out of Western science.
Mm. So where should, because there's a, so easy for me to say. So there's a thread, right, that runs through all of them.
Well, maybe I should back up a little bit,
Mhm.
because my path has been, when I first realized that remote viewing was real, some 25, 30 years ago, I began looking into everything else that I'd been told about, that I'd been told was not true, and yet I'm going to go back and look and see what's the evidence for it, or what's the real truth. And I found 20 or 30 phenomena that there's very good evidence are real, like the out-of-body experience, like the near-death experience, ESP, teleportation. If you start looking into this as a scientist, you find there's lots of data, which is not easy to find, but there are experiments done in China, for example. They have gifted children who can cause beans in a bottle to pass through the bottle, through a box, and out into their hands. It's called teleportation. They can do it while being watched by scientists. There are scientists in China who have watched other experiments where some very gifted people can teleport their own bodies into rooms, out of rooms, etc. One man named Zhang Baozheng, who was famous in Hong Kong, he had a sports car. He was given him by a Chinese millionaire or billionaire, and he would used to race it around town and get lots of traffic tickets. Well, the police kept pulling him over, giving him tickets, but when they got back to their police office, the tickets were missing from their folder.
Oh.
So there are people who can do these things.
So how did that happen? Wait, what
Well,
happened? How did that happen?
well, it's this special energy that I talk about in my second book. It's called the torsion energy,
Yeah.
or life force, or chi. Really kind of changes the nature of space and time. So you can pass material through other material. You can cause it to jump its location. So it's the same energy is what makes up the aura,
Yeah.
and it's also the energy that makes up the soul. So we can use that under conscious control to do things that our Western science would say is impossible.
Exactly. That's how it works. And by the way, that guy in Hong Kong, he's my kind of guy. Yeah, but when you're saying that, we could use this to our advantage under conscious control, that is exactly what people never have been taught how to do. They're told that it doesn't work, but it does work. And that's how I came up with these two pictures from the time travel experiment, Nori. Because under conscious control, there really is no limitations to what you can do.
But the secret there, of course, is to train the mind, to discipline ourselves, to be able to hold a thought or hold a frequency, and that is one of the keys to be able to control these forces. And you're right. Our Western education system, with arithmetic and multiplying and spelling, we don't train the mind to the real skills we need to control this energy, and that's where yogis or Qigong masters or other people in spiritual disciplines do get the training to learn how to control this energy.
And I think the training, you should not be underestimated, because if you go astral traveling and you go astral projecting and you are not trained well enough, and you meet with a situation where you can't get back in your body, it's not such a comfortable experience.
Well, one of the a lot of what I did in writing the third book is investigate experiences with mediums and other types of afterlife information. One man who had died, he was a well-known minister and theologian, but had arranged for a very highly qualified medium to stay in touch with him after he died. And for the next year, he would transmit back information about what he was going through in the afterlife. And it became a very good little book about what that's like. But one of the things he said is he took classes in what he called one-pointedness,
Really?
how to focus his mind on one thought in the afterlife, because there the power of intention is so much greater than it is here. So if you in the afterlife, if you're traveling to London, and then your mind wanders and you think about Paris, you'll end up in Paris. So you have to stay focused on a thought. And he said that's one of the reasons people say what we are supposed to be learning in the present physical life is how to focus our minds, because that's that power of intention, which works here, but it's slower. And so if we can focus that here, we can be much better off when we pass over.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying, keeps bringing up the movie The Secret, because you're talking about intention. And although there were some really great concepts and aspects to that movie, it certainly wasn't comprehensive in instruction, because it was missing the application part, because it led you to believe that if you just think about, rubbing the lamp that the genie's in, that the genie's going to drop whatever it is into your lap. So it missed really honing in on how important it is to become, one pointed, to become very, very focused, to become, crystal clear, and then to focus your intention. So,
Right, right.
mhm,
And one of the things I talk about in chapter 1 of the book is Andrew Carnegie
ah,
and Napoleon Hill. Of course,
mhm,
Andrew Carnegie became one of the wealthiest people in the world, created the steel industry and other railroads and things
yeah,
like that. But he gave away 90% of his wealth in the last 20 or 30 years of his life. He funded thousands of libraries, but he hired a man named Napoleon Hill to do research on how it was that he was so successful. He had Napoleon Hill interview all the other luminaries of that period, uh, Edison and all the great scientists and engineers who did so much. Henry Ford did so much to transform the face of America. And so Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, takes that principle and puts it into a formula that anybody can apply. And it does exactly that thing that you just said. It uses intention, but it uses it in a very specific way so that our goals become very vivid. We focus on them. We put the power of energy and emotion into our goals. And then miraculously, the physical world has this way of materializing into the form that we are visualizing.
So, is there any correlation to this soul energy that we're talking about and that process?
Yes, and that's also where this torsion energy or life force energy that I talk about in volumes 2 and 3 of my books comes in, because that is the energy that's in the aura around us. That's the energy we are exerting to shape the reality that we're in. It can change events around us to make certain things more likely. So
Yeah.
when you are focusing your intention on something, it's that energy that is, if you like, affecting the molecules, infecting
Right.
the quantum energy, so that the thing you desire is more likely to come true.
So can you, and this might be obscure, just tell me if it is. Can you speak to that in particles and waves? I mean, can you explain that way as well?
You can, and that's part of what I do in the second book, because this energy is able to change time, and it
Mm,
also changes frequency. And since the quantum world is governed by frequency and time, we can shift the frequency of the reality that we're in. I'm going a little too fast here, I
this is
realize, but
good. No, it's very
No,
good.
that's good.
because one of the frameworks, one of the basic assumptions in my model is that the world we live in is a synchronized universe. The particles, the matter that we consider to be real, uh, is actually synchronized with our own particles, and that's how we stay in touch with them. That's how we select the reality that we're in. And they all see each other, they exchange forces, and they conclude, oh yes, you're real, I'm real. But there could be many other realities with different frequencies that don't see ours. They're in a different frequency band, if you like.
Mhm.
They interact among themselves, not so much with us. So it's like changing the tuner on a radio dial, that we are tuned to a certain frequency, which determines the reality that we're in. Uh, and so our consciousness is really controlling that tuner, uh, and we can change events around us by using that frequency, or by changing it to bring about events or results we would like to achieve.
So there we have the multidimensional multiverse.
Yes, and it's very real. And I in my first book, I sort of put this together. I realized that you had to have this because there are many paranormal phenomena. We'll say, take healing. There are Philippine healers, for example, who can reach their hand inside the body of their patient and pull out organs or do manipulations, and the natural reaction of a skeptic would be, oh, that's just fakery. They're having chicken gizzards and they're making it look like something real.
Uh-huh.
But I know of scientists who have taken part in this work, including done their own, been able to reach into that incision that's made by one of these Philippine healers.
Mm-hmm.
So there's very real phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we know is that in this way, we can pass material objects through other material objects without any interference, even though you'd say from Western science, it's impossible. So this is how the little children in China in the EHF program caused the beans to come out of the bottle and out of the box into their hands, because the frequencies are shifted and they can pass through the other. I have a phone call here on the side. They turn that off. I don't think we'll be needing that. So this is the secret to how matter can pass through other matter by shifting the frequency. And so the synchronized universe model explains that.
And what book is that in?
Well, the first book, Synchronized Universe: New Science of the Paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I call Volume 1. These are all on my website. They're all described at the synchronizeduniverse.com website. So the first book really lays out this model. I kind of go through about 10 or 12 basic paranormal experiences that are well documented. We have good experimental evidence for them, like levitation, like ESP, like psychokinesis, and go through each one. And then I say, okay, how do we have to change our present physics to be able to explain these things? Because right now our science would say, well, those are impossible. But this presents a model that can account for all of the paranormal phenomena that are they're well documented. So that's really how it started.
And I also read there is several places within quantum mechanics where they say that, yeah, there are theories out there. And within one concept, if one of the theories have been proven to be accurate, that is enough evidence to consider the others also very plausible to be accurate. So if you look at, let's say, chi or prana or orgone energy, I have the impression that that is actually an interdimensional energy that can phase in and out of the physical. So when it phases out of the physical, it goes into that area where there is no time, and it can latch on to something that we have sent a message with for something that we want, and then we pull that back and that thing comes with it.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Aage. And I have pictures in my books to explain how that works. Another way you can describe it is that one plane of reality, the synchronized plane that we consider to be the real world, think of that as a sheet of paper. And that sheet is one phase, one frequency. We call that our reality. But there can be many other sheets, almost like a stack of paper, and many other realities all stacked up. And they're at different frequencies. They don't normally see our particular reality, but things like this energy, the chi energy or torsion energy, can shift the frequency of the plane that you're in and shift you so that now you're in touch with another reality, another plane. You can pull phenomena from it. You can turn off or on forces between them, and that helps explain a lot of these phenomena.
And I think too that when we look at, let's say, those sheets of paper that we can stack them on top of each other, if there is wet ink on one of them, it could smudge off on another one, and that could be maybe an analogy to what is actually happening. We can have a parallel world to ours just really close and next to us. If the energies are strong in that reality, strong enough to bleed over into ours, we could actually see and experience some of that.
Yes, and that happens at haunted sites, sacred sites, stone circles, crop circles, UFO landing sites, all kinds of things like that, where these energies do get mixed together. You're right.
So talking about chi and talking about psychic surgery and talking about torsion energy, you really don't need to make a cut in the body energetically in order to work on an organ. Because, I mean, we're working on energy and, right?
Yeah, they do it two different ways. I mean, in one way, they can actually reach their hand or their, into the body directly. Sometimes they make an incision, but it's made with this energy, so they can just wave their hand along the body and cause an incision to open up, which means that the flesh in that region suddenly loses its tenacity and opens up into an opening that they can put their hand into. And then afterwards, when it's finished, they wave their hand again and it connects up. And it sounds like magic, but we have films of this happening. And I talked to a Western educated barrister, a lawyer from England when I was down there, who'd been among these Philippine healers, and he'd seen it happen. And he was with a group that was touring these Philippine healers, and one of his friends was having a prostate operation. And while the Philippine healer has his friend opened up, between his legs, he asks this barrister, "Now put your hand up in there." And his barrister could put his hand up and feel the organs inside his friend's body.
Ew.
Really?
So there was no question about trickery. And then once he pulled his hand out, the surgeon waves his hands again and it seals up.
Well, that's interesting, and not only Philippine healers do that. I'm a Reiki. I'm honored to be a Reiki master, and I've done some Qigong in the past. So a lot of what I do is an amalgam, of all of the modalities. And when I do what's like psychic surgery, I'm still working on the energetic field. I can make energetic movements that would break up like the disease in an organ and then pull it out. And then, of course, pack it with the right energy and then the healing energy. So, I find that quite fascinating, though. I don't know.
Well, one thing I discovered is that we have this energy within our body called the biophoton energy. That every nucleus of every cell in the body is constantly emitting and receiving little pulses of light called biophotons. They're quantized, and the cells in our body use this to communicate back and forth, and that's how we tell cells how to heal, how to grow, etc. And it turns out the entire body is filled with this energy. It's a coherent light, like a laser light, if you like, that is sort of directing the body's growth and healing, and it has a hologram to it. So there's a pattern. It carries the pattern. So it's how when you cut your finger grows back, and the fingerprint comes back with it. It knows how to connect up every part of the body. It's all recorded in these holographic patterns. But outside the body, it turns out, there is also a field, and that is the torsion field. It's not made of light. It doesn't carry energy, but it's really created by and interacting with these biophotons. So that pattern is what you can interact with when you're doing Reiki or remote energy healing. You're manipulating the torsion field, and it's carrying that same holographic pattern right down into the body. So you can actually directly affect the pattern that the organs are growing according to.
That's about the best I've heard it explained.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
so good. So good. Thank you.
And when we're talking about energy and intention and how to manipulate energy, I'm sorry, Nori, but I got a snitch on you. You
Do I have to mute you? Wait a minute.
I noticed that you had a spoon laying on your kitchen counter, and I remember I picked that thing and looked up, and I couldn't understand it because that spoon was rolled into a ball just about.
Yeah,
You bent that spoon.
I did. I've been several.
Yeah. Now
Yeah.
that's an expression of what the real power of the mind with intention can do when you focus.
And it's so interesting because it's actually in the place where you're not doing anything that it happens. Because while I'm there, right, it was like the little Indian boy in the Matrix, right? There is no spoon, right? When you get to that point, that spoon just turns into butter and can coil or do whatever you want to do with it. But it's in the space of not doing anything for me that it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He
Yeah,
gets snitched too.
yeah. And that makes sense though, because even in prayer, they say that when you're done with your visualization or prayer, then let it go. With other words, it becomes nothing to you because you have sent it out to the universe. Now the universe will go to work and take care of things for you. So you don't have to be concerned anymore.
And we have a call on the line.
Oh, hello. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi,
Yeah.
who's calling?
Yeah, hello. I was listening to the show. I've had a lot of experience with paranormal, and one of the things we were realizing lately was that a lot of paranormal phenomena could be happening, and a lot of temperature changes happen, and then you'll hear like a noise, or somebody will get scratched. But it won't be. You'll think it's something scratching you, like a dog or even a human like us. But actually, it could be like electrical burning of scratches. But anyway, a lot of this stuff happens. I think when you pass away, you could either go like to the light or you could stay because you got the free will. You got the free will now. You could do what that's a gift we all have, is the free will. You're going to have that. That's the beauty of life is freedom, you know.
Yeah.
So we know that we seem to know that. But here's the weird thing that I've seen lately is like we could do like a ritual to release to love and thankfulness and goodness and whatever means you could use, whether it's through with church or a prayer. There's all types of different prayers and stuff. But what I've noticed, some of these occurrences they stop happening for the people that are suffering. Where these paranormal hauntings are happening, and it seems to and I'm wondering like where do they go or where are they released to? My name is Michael.
Hey, Mike. Hi, Michael. Claude, we talked about this last night, but I would love to talk about it again. Claude, you want to address this?
Well, there's several different ways you can go on this. I mean, number one, I guess the first question for many people is, well, where is heaven? Where did they go? When you say the energy left the room, you can sense that it's gone from where you are. What happened to it? And one of the consequences of the synchronized universe model, as we were just saying a minute ago with these stacks of paper, is that there are many realities. And some of them are physical, but there can also be higher realities that operate at a different frequency. And the spirit planes are much like that. And so when the soul leaves the body, it is now free to take up these higher frequencies where it'll find itself in the astral plane or planes above that. It seems as though the afterlife there's a whole dynamic to how it works. There are guides and intelligent beings that help watch over us as we move up in these planes. There's also some basic principles that like frequencies are attracted to like frequencies. So, for example, depending on our own level of spiritual development, we'll probably find ourselves at a level with other beings who are at a similar level to us. And that's why there are some people who come back from near-death experiences or mediumistic experiences saying that they were in hell, that there was a lower level that was very unpleasant. Others talk about a level of great bliss. So there are many different levels in the afterlife, and where we find ourselves will depend on the level of our own soul, the vibrational frequency of our soul. But the wonderful thing about it is that we're never trapped there. We're never stuck there for eternity, as religions would have us believe. It's really a matter of where we are right now in our development. And as we grow and become wiser in those afterlife planes, we also continue to grow. So there's so much more information and so much more activity in those planes. Down here in the physical, we kind of think this is all there is. But when you get there, you find out that these worlds are very complicated, very beautiful in many ways, and education continues. We continue to learn and have experiences in these higher planes.
Right.
So, and Claude, last night you talked about, and this is what you were asking, Michael. We talked about how sometimes people who die suddenly or don't know they're dead, like they're still, in their apartment, and 2 families later they're still in there, right?
Yeah.
So I think this was what Claude was saying about getting stuck. I mean, Michael.
Yeah.
So Claude, can you speak to that again?
Sure.
Yeah.
Just in the same way that our aura has layers at different frequencies around the aura, there is one layer which is the closest to the body, if you like. It's called the etheric layer, and it's what enables the soul to make contact with the physical world. It's kind of the lowest vibrational energy, and it is so the intermediary layer that lets us see physical reality. Many people who die suddenly don't know they're dead. They're still trying to keep their contact with the physical world. Other people who don't believe in the afterlife, they're afraid of what they might find. They want to hang on to the physical reality. So this etheric layer can be held on to by our intention for a lot longer than necessary. For most people, it dissolves within a few hours to a few days. And then we find ourselves in the next higher plane, which is the astral dimension. We see the white light, we see loving beings, and we start going through a process of becoming comfortable in these afterlife planes. But some people hang on to that etheric layer. They don't want it to let go, and they stay stuck. Yeah. And what they often describe is that what they see is kind of a dark, dim world. They can't really quite make out the forms, and time just seems to pass, but nothing wonderful seems to be happening, and they don't know where to go. And this is where soul rescue comes in. Like the Monroe Institute is one place that teaches this, where we go into an altered state, a meditative state, and we can make contact with these beings, and they often describe what they see. They're in a sort of gray or a cloudy realm with no particular features. And when you show up in those realms in your own spirit form or your own intention form, what you'll tell them is, look around. You'll see, look for a being, a white being, a bright lighted being. There's somebody there who's probably waiting for you if you just turn around. And when you do, they'll see their guide, who will then lead them into the gate to allow them to go into the afterlife, get past that etheric layer, and then they'll be able to have their experiences. They'll meet their departed relatives, their loved ones, and they'll begin their normal afterlife process. But some people, and there's a famous case of one young man who died at sea, and the ship went down, and he was holding on to a floating piece of wood. For hundreds of years, he was holding on to this wood, thinking he was still alive, did not know that he was dead. Wow. And that was one of the subjects of the soul rescue. They were able to help him to look around and realize that, there was help waiting for him. He could let go of that etheric level and move on to the higher planes.
He must have been exhausted.
I was going to say, Dr. Meeks, you can look up Meeks. He did some afterlife studies. He took a picture of his umbilical cord. It's like they call it the silver cord. It's attached to our soul or our plasma or whatever, our soul. but he took a picture of that, and we were thinking that that was the light, that like you go back through the silver cord, that could be the light. Everybody talks about that light, going back, and then again, maybe some people don't want to go to the light, or you know what I mean, or they get stuck for other reasons, like you're saying, right? You know what I'm saying? But I'd like to speed one thing up for you real quick. I'd like to speed one thing up. I wanted to say, I want to get your take on reincarnation, because I believe that if there's reason enough, that people, including myself, would come back, because I really don't like it here, frankly, but there's reason behind everything, all right? And that I'd like to get your take behind that. And another thing is, we saw recently was a big shadow person. It was we caught him on camera at a very haunted and demonic sort of a house that nobody lives in, but we had cameras running, and so it's a particular guy owns the place, just keeps it. He's a professional paranormal person. But anyway, I couldn't believe it. This was like a 6-foot man, like a shadow, and it was unbelievable. It was like an outline of a real man who walked by. Mm-hmm. And it was a big man, and it was sort of a scary thing to think about, a big man like that, And I was wondering, what do you think? Could that be some type of a person, or an evil person, or a dangerous person, or entity, or what is your take on that? Go ahead, then, with those two things.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's clearly some kind of being, probably a deceased person of some type. I don't know whether he was evil or not. It depends on a lot of things. But sometimes our own fear can make it seem more evil than it really is. I don't know. I've been in haunted houses with some pretty powerful entities, and oftentimes you feel the coldness when they're nearby, and there are other ways of measuring it. And so there's lots of research, as you know, on ghost hunting and haunted areas. But let's see, your first question was what now? The reincarnation. Yeah. I have a whole chapter about reincarnation in my book. There are lots of people, as you know, who have, well, first of all, children, oftentimes, when they're little, they first begin to speak, age 2, 3, 4 years old. They often remember their past lives, and they talk about what they were like, what they remember from their previous life. Now, after age 5 or 6, they start getting educated, and more, they begin to lose those memories. But people have done research, as you probably know, University of Virginia, Ian Stevenson, who has interviewed thousands of these cases, especially in India and cultures where reincarnation is not looked down upon but is accepted, and been able to find from the information, it's so detailed that they can actually find the town where that person had been alive in his previous life. They can find his relatives. They can verify that he died the way he said he died. All these details about these cases. So there's no question, in my mind that reincarnation is real and very genuine. What you find out in the afterlife research, and I have a lot of that in the book, is that one of the first things that we do in the afterlife, that we start working on as our education as a soul, is planning our next life. What are the things that we didn't do that we wanted to do? What are the things we wanted to learn? What are the skills? What are our shortcomings? Are there things I'm sorry? Hello?
Nope.
Okay, I got a voice.
Just continue there.
Okay, yeah. What are the things that we may have done to others that were wrong, that we have to go back and pay back or correct? So there's a whole series of considerations that involve the next life and the reincarnation process. There are libraries over there. There are guides. There are typically soul groups. We often don't incarnate just by ourselves. There are often other people around us, friends. Look around your children, your parents, your friends. Some of these people you may have reincarnated with many times before, and you're back with them again, perhaps to balance out karma from previous experiences. So reincarnation is real as part of the learning process, and a lot of this planning for the next incarnation occurs in the afterlife.
Yeah, you make a good point. And you know what? I'm a realist. I look into nature. I look at the nature of things. Okay, we're not going to go there. But I see like death and life and, summer and winter, and the leaves fall. They go back into the ground. They regenerate. They recycle. And I was talking about this umbilical cord. We have that. Your mother fed you. You were a child in your mother's womb. It was connected to her with the umbilical, and I as above is below. I see there may be, like, to our soul, we may have this silver cord, right? We may have this recycling. Everybody loves recycling. That's all you hear about today is recycling.
Yeah,
it's right.
You're right.
I believe in everything. Yeah. I'm a naturalist.
And the silver cord is real, and when people go out of body, that silver cord can often be seen by others. It connects us back, the physical body with the soul, the outer body, the astral body. It is, you're right, that's the connection with the higher dimensions.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. That was an interesting question there, and I hope you got most of your answers. I got one quick comment to that, and that is that a lot of times, and my experience from having a look behind the curtain is that you find entities out there roaming around, and they have no clue of what to do because they were atheists. They did not believe in anything after when they dropped the body. So then they end up there, and it's totally unfamiliar. They don't know what to do, and they feel scared, so they stay away from other entities, and they just end up being ghosts.
Yeah. Listen, I'm going to let you go. And real quick, before I hang up the phone, could your friend talk about forgiveness, okay? I know that sounds a little bit religious or something, but, forgiveness is like a starting over. It reminds me of reincarnation. It reminds me of, I wish I did this, I wish I did that. But like forgiveness is like being, like you heard of being born again. I think that's a very powerful, if we could forgive ourselves, we could forgive others, but this new person that you could become, I don't know, there's just something weird to that.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
Yes, Michael, that is a very good point, and we'll see if we can talk to that. Thank you very much.
Go do that. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you. Yeah, one of the things we learn in the afterlife is that our souls live forever. So we have lots of time to figure out these different questions and other dimensions. So our souls live forever. Number two, we're all connected. We all come from a universal source, which you can call God, you can call universal consciousness. However you want to call it, there's a connection we all have with one another. So love for each other is a very natural thing, and it's very important, I think, to remember that we have that deep soul connection to each other. When somebody cuts you off in traffic, or does something that makes you angry, and you might be thinking some not very nice thoughts about them, but try to remember that is an immortal soul, just like you are. They're here just like you are, trying to learn how things are, how to behave, how to grow. And so all of these experiences are just kind of part of their experience, just as they are yours. And it makes it easier to love them when you can remember that they are part of you and we're part of them. So I think love is the key to being able to move on up the higher vibrational levels in this whole process.
Yeah, and that's another learning experience when you're running through traffic and somebody cuts you off, and it's the first thing that comes to mind sometimes is to tell them that they're number one in your life, but that's the way to do it.
Exactly.
So can we go back for a minute to soul retrieval? Have you heard of some modalities that address the person who is stuck and tell them to turn left? Have you heard that?
Yes, that the Monroe Institute teaches that. If you're not familiar with, you probably are with the Monroe Institute in Virginia, but they teach out-of-body experiences and use hemisync tapes to help people get out of body. And so when you encounter a spirit who is in that state, who's kind of feeling lost and doesn't know where he is or where he's going, one of the best things, one of the easiest things to do, if you can communicate with them, is to ask them to look around.
Yeah.
Look behind, look over your shoulder, look behind you, see if you see anybody, see if you see anything. They'll often see a being, sometimes a being of light, waiting back there. And that is their guide. That's their soul guide that's kind of waiting for them to help lead them across. But the trick is how to get their attention.
Mm-hmm.
So if they will look around, they'll often see that being, and then that being can help them to show them the tunnel or the gate to cross over.
Mm-hmm. And interestingly, there was when I was in North Carolina, like in the country, bless their hearts, there was this one intersection in the country, and every time I came to the intersection, I almost rolled through the stop sign and had an accident. And it happened so many times that it made me go, what the heck is going on here? So I just figured there must be some stuck energies there. There must be some stuck, soul energy there. So I did what I do, and it never happened again. And I know it could be synchronistic, but I think it was more than synchronistic. Yeah.
You didn't see that psychic traffic light?
No, there was a stop sign. And you know what? I did talk to some people who lived there, and there was a really bad accident at that intersection.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
probably you're right then. There's still some energy or some beings that maybe haven't gotten over that yet.
Well, I'm like the canary, that goes into the coal mine. If there's any beings around and I don't ask for it, I'm going to end up, being notified.
Yeah. So you could use your intention at that point and just, try to get their attention and
Right.
ask to help them to release and move on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That goes along with that story from San Antonio, Texas, where there's right at the railroad crossing, there was a bus there, I think a couple of decades back, that got stuck on the tracks, and the train ran over the bus and killed a bunch of kids. And now there are cars coming up to that particular crossover, railroad crossings, and they can feel the car actually rolling a little bit uphill, all the way up, want to go in on the track. And they've even seen in the dust on the back of the car, they have seen small handprints.
Wow.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
This is a big story. You can Google this one and it comes up. There's a lot of people that have had that experience.
Mm-hmm.
So Margaret has a question. Question is, can you have a near-death experience while you're alive and without being in any physical harm? So that brings to mind that movie Flatline. Remember that movie where they were stopping the rhythm of the heart and then bringing them back?
Sure. And of course, I mean, clinically in that movie, they were dead, at least by some of our measures of death, the heartbeat, the brain waves, etc. But you're right. Essentially, I guess the soul gets the message in those conditions, and it does try to leave. And so I think yogis and other people who practice deep meditation or go out of body, you're doing that to some extent. And I think what happens is that during those experiences, you may find yourself in these afterlife planes. You may find yourself in a state of consciousness which corresponds to an afterlife plane. And so some people who have near-death experiences like that may describe the conditions that they encounter in this other reality. And that is one of these afterlife planes.
Yeah.
So I just we have about 6 minutes left, and I was just, what Michael said keeps coming up for me about forgiveness. And in my book, which I'll talk about in the very near future, there's a page in my book that speaks of forgiveness, and it's so interesting. It's the page, when I gave everybody the beta test of my book, I would always wait to see their expression, and I thought their expression would change on another page. Thanks, Pixie. But it turned out that on the forgiveness page, everybody had like an experience. Some people cried, and I'm talking, little kids to 80-year-olds. So I think there's something there, in Michael's message, and I think you said it before, Claude. That love. I don't think you can really have forgiveness without having the experience of love. Maybe not for that person, but at least for yourself. And in that, it's true. It is like being born again. And I think there's so much freedom in that. So, any thoughts, guys?
Yeah, and a very important thing too is we are the most important person that we have to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
we got to forgive ourselves. And when we do, that's kind of like the safety valve in the universe, because forgiveness can actually get rid of karma.
Yeah. I totally agree with both of you. I think that it really goes back to our connection to each other, that we are all really part of one great consciousness. And when we can love one another and love ourselves, then we're seeing this greater being that we really are part of.
I love that.
Yeah.
We have about 4 minutes left. And Claude, I've put your website, synchronizeduniverse.com, in the chat room several times. I just feel like giving you my bank card number now for all of your books. I'm going to go buy them.
Well, there is as a practical matter, there is a little tab on the website called Bookstore for people who want to purchase the books, or they can just email me directly. My email address is Claude Swanson, that's ClaudeSwanson, Claude Swanson @gmail.com. You can just email me directly, and I can arrange purchase that way. So, or ask me questions. So either way, and I'll appreciate very much any purchases, and
Yeah, and do you also do signed copies?
Yeah. You went away there. Somebody went away.
Oh, no.
I think Aage asked if you will sign any copies for people.
If you email me and ask me to sign them, I will be happy to.
Okay, that sounds good.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Claude, Dr. Claude Swanson, for being with us, and thank you, Aage. Thank you, Katie, to our producer. Thank you, everybody who participated live or are listening on the replay. So grateful to have had this experience with you guys tonight. Thank you, Claude.
You're very welcome. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
We have to have you back.